So do you struggle to hear compression inside of your mix when you're using it? Then you're in the right spot, because today we're going to be talking about how to hear compression. My name is Tyson. I'm a mastering engineer at DinosaurDogStudio.com. Before we dive into the content, I have one free bonus for you. If you look in the description in this video, you'll be able to find a link to my free compression guide. So you can download that to understand the different styles of compression that I'm going to be referring to inside this video, and also just get a quick reference guide on how to use compression and how to achieve various styles of compression. It also comes with a free EQ guide just because it's an easy package deal, and so I threw them together. So you'll also get that as a free bonus for watching this video. Now let's dive straight into the content on how to hear compression. And so we're going to be talking about our drums here, and specifically, we're going to be focusing on the transients versus tails. And drums are really easy when we're talking about transients versus tails, because we have our kick and a snare, which is our transients in this case, and then we have the cymbals, which is the tail in this scenario. Theoretically, yeah, kick and the snare actually have their own tails as well, but when we're talking about the drum bus as a whole, that's really what we can view this as. How that actually impacts our compression here, it's going to make it very, very obvious when we're using our attack versus release and what settings we have set for those various controls. A quick review if you're not already familiar with compression and the various tools that we have within our compressor to get the right kind of compression for our various tracks that we want to compress. We have our threshold, ratio, attack, and release. Those are the main settings every single compressor has. So our threshold is basically where when our audio reaches that threshold, the compressor is going to start to work. Very simple. Ratio is basically how extreme our compression is going to be. The higher the ratio, the more the compressor is going to work, and therefore the more obvious our compression is going to be. Our attack is going to be after the audio passes our threshold. It's how long it's going to wait before it starts to compress. So a longer attack, it's going to wait a little bit longer before it starts to actually compress. A release is very similar to attack. However, it's when we're going to stop compressing. If my release is set at, say, 100 milliseconds, it's going to wait 100 milliseconds after it starts to compress to then release that and go back to zero gain reduction. Those are the basics of a compressor. Every compressor has some form of those. So today we're going to be diving into how to hear our attack and release. Most people get the threshold and ratio, it makes sense, but let's dive into attack and release specifically and how to listen for those inside of your mix. So we're going to start with attack. And in order to start with attack, it's actually really, really helpful to turn your audio down or only hearing the transients, which is the kick and the snare in this example, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my stereo out to -17 or so. And it's going to be very, very quiet, but listen for the attack as I move it faster. So I'm going to start with a long attack. Basically, it's not going to be touching the kick or the snare at all, but then as I move it forward, it's going to really squish the snare and the kick, and you're really going to be able to hear it at low volume. So as you can notice, as I move the attack faster, obviously it's compressing more because it's hitting a higher point on that transient, and so it feels like it needs to squish the audio down a little bit more. I also have a pretty high ratio on here, so that's helping make this compression more obvious. But you can really feel how it sucks the life out of the punch of the kick and the snare when I move that attack down to 0, where it's basically not allowing any of the transient through. But once I get to 10 or even 15 milliseconds, you can really start to feel that punch again. It's still cutting off a little bit of the kick and the snare, but it's really giving that life back to the drums. So I'm going to move our attack back to around 100, so a very long attack for this, so I don't want to be touching my kick or my snare at all. And now let's move on to release. So I've made it loud again, and this time when we're talking about release, we're going to be focused on the cymbals and not the kick and the snare, because that's going to be our valleys for this example. So I'm going to be pretty extreme with my compression so you can definitely hear it. Again, focus on the cymbals as I move the release. So as you can tell, the longer my release is, the quieter the cymbals are overall. And then also, when I get to that sweet spot of around 200-ish milliseconds, you can start to feel this kind of swelling feeling in the cymbals, where it's compressing and then it's holding on to that compression for a while and then it releases it. What that is doing is basically causing like a reverse cymbal inside of my beat, inside of my drums. While it's really unnatural and it creates this pumping feeling that can be used effectively, for example, a lot of electronic artists use that very effectively to create intentional pumping inside of the song to create this feeling of movement where otherwise it would be kind of bland. You can definitely use your release in that way. Obviously, the more extreme your compression is, like I have it right now, the more obvious that pumping feeling is going to be. But you can make it very, very subtle if you want as well, or just avoid that pumping feeling altogether by making your compression very subtle with your ratio. The other thing I want you to notice is that as I moved the release faster, the cymbals appeared to be louder. And then as I backed it off so it was longer, the cymbals actually get quieter. That is because I'm allowing the transients to pass through, but then compressing the tail. As we can kind of start to conclude here, there are several different techniques that we could use to impact our drums. So if we want to have, say, more smooth drums, and we don't want to have as much punch in them, I could move my attack faster. Maybe not to zero, but move it pretty fast. And then I'll kind of shave off the transients a little bit, make it less punchy, and it'll sound smoother. And then if I want to make my release longer, it's going to even smooth it out even more because it's going to have less impact on the next transients, because as the next snare or kick hits, it's already going to be compressing a little bit, so it's not going to be as extreme when those hit. So it's going to just basically smooth everything out. And then if I have a fast release, say, with a longer attack, it's going to allow that punch to come through, but it's also not going to compress that much on the cymbals. And so I'm kind of getting more dynamic feel from the transients without actually impacting the tails of the notes that much. So it may not feel like it's doing that much, but it's actually giving you a little bit more dynamics inside of your track. Alternatively, if we left a longer attack and then a long release, we're going to be focusing just on those tails of the notes. So our cymbals are going to be quieter, but we're still going to add that really loud punch and that really good impact from the kick and the snare. There's no right answer in how to compress your drums. You have to use your own idea of what you want in your mix. You can use this concept for any track that you're going to be compressing. Use this to really solve the issues in potentially your tracks themselves. With that said, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful in being able to hear compression and understand compression a little bit deeper. Make sure that you subscribe, because next video that comes out is going to be going over the styles of compression in practice, so you can actually hear the difference between those styles of compression working. Thanks for watching and have a great week.